So Mark. Okay. So I think Mark's going to show them and I'll just announce them. Here we go. Any minute. Here we go. Okay, so the wine, we had 3 categories: wine, food, and sunflowers. In first place for the wine category was Crystal Rubik, and runner-up was Maxine Lazinski. The food category, first place, Crystal, runner-up, Maxine. And for sunflowers, first place, me, and runner-up, Gail Kirkland. Honorable mentions go to Scotty, Roxborough, Helen Dobson, and Mark Holloway. And here are the pictures that she chose. I think just show them like that, yeah. And so she's offered a bottle of wine for the first place winners. And Carmen, was it a $5 gift? And a $5 gift certificate for the runner-up and honorable mentions, yeah. So she has a booth at the farmers market at Gasoline Alley, and she will have them there. I'll be in touch with her to find out when she has them, but I'll give her the name so that she knows when you're coming by. If anybody can't come by, I can certainly stop out and pick them up for you. So yeah, so that's kind of cool. And she's looking forward to doing it again next year. And if we have any ideas of how to improve the experience, she's willing to listen. And yeah, she enjoyed it. It took her a while to get to the pictures, but she enjoyed doing it. Thanks. So before we introduce our guest speaker, I just want to make sure that everybody that's joining tonight is on. Clayton's group from Images Alberta was going to join in about 7. So I just want to make sure, are you all here? Clayton, are you?
I'm here, yes.
Okay. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can. Got a great voice.
I see. Oh, thank you. Some of our people are filtering in, so I see it starting to happen.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, I'll introduce Rick here in just a second.
Okay.
So I first came across Rick, I believe, from one of Images Alberta presentations last year, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought we should get him for our club. Rick is an international award-winning and published architect, urban designer, and photographer. And as a photographer, Rick has been named a laureate within the worldwide Nikonian community. So I'm assuming that's to do with Nikon. And hooray, because I'm a Nikon shooter myself. Rick's photography is informed from his background as a professional award-winning and published architect, urban designer, and photographer. So I think it's going to be interesting. We have a lot of people that are interested in shooting architecture, whether in big cities, small towns. So Rick, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm very pleased to be here. And I see some familiar names that people are signing in, so that's very gratifying. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to do a couple of the things, because what happens is when I share my screen, I get a bunch of other images there that I'm going to reduce, and I'm going to hide my floating meeting controls. And here we go. So what you guys should see is my title slide here. So I got to just mention that, if you take a course in public speaking, one of the first things they tell you is that you should always narrow the topic, okay? You should focus in on a specific aspect of what you're interested in. Well, the topic that I have here is enormous. Photographing the urban environment, from buildings to cityscapes. So there's a lot that I could talk about. So what I've done is I have refined it down because I want to give you hopefully some, you know, educational benefit from my contribution here tonight. And I'm going to show you examples that range from documenting reality to interpreting reality, and then even going past that to, I'll argue, recreating or reality reimagining, you know, reimagining reality, if that makes sense. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. If you have any questions during my talk, you're welcome to interrupt. Otherwise, at the end, we'll have a chance to have a little discussion if you're up for that. So the first thing I've got to, I think, talk about here is to kind of define what urban means. All right. A lot of people think that urban means like high-rise buildings and super high density environments, but that's not really the case. All right. And I'm going to use the photo on the left to explain what urban's all about, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to the inside of this building. This is actually a hotel, an urban resort that we designed in Victoria, British Columbia. But it's a good way to describe what urban is, because in a community where you have the private realm juxtaposed directly to the public realm, that's what urban is. So in this example, this is a hotel lobby, all right? And it's open to the public, but they can close it off anytime they want. So it's private in the sense of the ownership of the hotel. But if you look to the upper left of the image, there's outside you can see through a window, a glass wall, and you see a sidewalk and you see a street, and then beyond that is actually a park space. That's all publicly accessible 24 hours a day. So that's pure urban when you have the public realm, which is publicly accessible spaces outdoors, adjacent directly to private buildings. So buildings are framing the public realm, if that makes sense. That's what urban is. Next thing I want to do is I just want to let you know, I guess, my favorite quote from another photographer, Dorothea Lange. The camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. Very powerful, very true. Even if you learn photography and you go on you find yourself in a location where maybe you don't have your camera, you're still going to be able to see more, appreciate more, remember more than you would have had you not been experienced in photography. So I kind of use that as my objective here is to take you from seeing to perceiving, or kind of understanding what you're looking at, if I can put it that way. So let's start with the cityscape. This is Vancouver. This is the north face of Vancouver. I live in a community called North Vancouver, which is a city that's north of Vancouver. Very clever name. They call it North Vancouver. This is a winter's day. It's sunny outside, which is not typical necessarily in Vancouver. And there's snow on the ground, which is also not all that typical of Vancouver, because it was just after a snowfall. So cityscapes in general, we're going to start with just briefly cityscapes, and then we'll conclude with cityscapes as well. But to start with, cityscapes can be very complex, and some would argue chaotic. This is a partial view of the downtown city of Toronto. And if I pan back here, you'll be able to see more of the downtown core. Now, I don't know how smooth the pan is given the bandwidth that you may have. So I'm hoping it's not too herky-jerky, but what can I say? We'll keep going. This is a long exposure, and I actually enhanced the water reflection.
Okay.
So now if we go inside the city, then we start having individual buildings, all right? And this is the St. James Cathedral, a huge spire on this thing. And it's also an example of some of the challenges in photographing urban settings. one challenge is it's just like super busy with stuff. I mean, look at all the overhead wires and lines to allow the trolleys to go through, because it's a major intersection for transit. And yeah, I guess I could have removed the wires, but you know, that would take a long time for me. I don't think I have the patience to do that. So what I did was I tried to actually include the wires in a way that they could peacefully coexist along with the building. So moving a few centimeters one way or another can make a big difference in how those overhead wires would relate to the architectural background. So now we've talked about briefly, I realize we're just getting started. We talked about a cityscape. We talked about a building. Now we're going to go inside the building, and we can look at just tons of details. All right. You know, urban environments are so target rich. Depending on what your interests are, depending on which lens you're using, there's so much choice of what you may be interested in photographing. So this is obviously the pulpit here in this church. And now I'm going to pan back. So now we can start to see the essence of kind of architectural photography, which is photographing the space. This is the nave of the church. And it allows me now to kind of clarify the definition or urban environments. And the definition I have for this is that there are a series of envelopes for people and their activities. All right. Those envelopes have different names. They're actually volumetric spaces. They're three-dimensional spaces. Most people would call them rooms. There's indoor rooms, there's outdoor rooms. The term that I like is behavioral settings, because if you understand what a space or a room is designed for, you know, it may affect where you decide to stand to photograph it, or where you decide to put the sensor or film plane in your camera to record it. So I like the term behavioral setting because then it starts to involve an understanding of why it occurred in the first place. What was the reason for it? We're going to move now from this space, and I love architectural photography because as Judy mentioned, I'm an architect, or I actually retired recently. Okay, I was trained originally to teach architecture. I thought I'd be a better teacher if I got some real world experience as an architect, and that went better than I expected. So for more than 4 decades, I practiced architecture. And the reason I'm showing you this image of Vancouver is that this is one of the projects that I was responsible for. It's actually just 2/3 of the North Shore of False Creek in Vancouver, if you've ever been to Vancouver. But it's quite a large development. And the reason I show it to you is because in order to plan large scale developments, I have to understand how people move through and perceive environments. And that knowledge is very helpful to photography. So I'm going to share some of that with you tonight. Okay. I built up my office I built up to 6 offices all over the world, and I've worked on projects all over the world. So I've been very lucky. And a lot of them are waterfront developments. A lot of them are urban in nature. And so I feel comfortable talking about that tonight, I have to tell you. So I'm here really, guys, because I love photography. When people find out that I'm retired, they ask me what I'm doing. And I don't say I'm a photographer because, well, you know what? Everybody these days is a photographer. Everyone has a camera, pretty much. What I say is that I enrich people's lives through enhanced visual perception. And of course, when I say that, you wouldn't believe the looks that I get. But it's a conversation starter. It's called an elevator pitch. All right. I'm most passionate actually about teaching and education. And I love this quote from Jill Biden, First Lady of the United States. She's a teacher, and her quote is, "Teaching isn't just what I do, it's who I am." And that's how I feel. Okay, and that's how I felt while I was practicing architecture. And as a teacher, I'm trained to purposely give you a few disruptive thoughts, not to give you any angst or a stomach ache. That's not my intent. The intent is to want to maybe get you to think about aspects of photography that maybe you hadn't considered previously. So I'm going to do that tonight by way of a handful of challenges. Okay, I'm going to use pictures, and I'm going to use words. You know, I know you've probably heard of the phrase "picture's worth 1,000 words," where I actually think that a great phrase is worth 1,000 pictures. So please don't leave, don't turn off. Okay, I know a lot of folks think that you shouldn't have to talk about photographs, they speak for themselves. Well, but words can help a lot. So bear with me. As Judy mentioned, my photography is actually informed from my background and from the history of the two-dimensional arts, specifically drawing and painting. We can learn a lot from drawing and painting, and we can learn a lot from the sciences of human vision, how we see and why we see it and how we interpret. It's quite fascinating. So I'll give you a taste of that as well. I mentioned I'm going to give you some challenges. The first two challenges I'm going to talk to you about tonight involve the notion of photographing contrasting light, all right, and actually photographing a clarity of edges of objects and elements, which sounds like, what are we talking about here? These challenges are actually inspired by neuroscience, the science of human vision. Okay, so let's take a look at this. First of all, let's talk about photographing light. Well, this should not surprise you, right? Contrasting light is how we see. And I'm going to show you an example of that. This is a wall, a brick wall. Okay, but can you see how the bricks are so individual that the light is shining right along the wall, the sunlight, and it's like the wall is three-dimensional, if that makes sense. The expression I use is that I can taste the wall. Please don't be offended by that, but the point is, it's like luscious, all right? And if we pan back again, you'll see that this is a street. So this is part of a public realm. This is very urban. These are townhouses along a street. It's in Boston. It's one of the oldest streets in the United States, actually. And I purposely arrived knowing where the sunlight was going to be in the time of day. I did that by using programs that you can get, like the Photographer's Ephemeris, where you can see where the sun's going to be, where the light's going to be cast, and so forth. But I was taking a series of images. The sun is moving from left to right, and the next picture after this, the sun was right in my face. It just, the picture didn't work at all. But look at the cobblestones on the ground. You can see how they are so alive because of the light. So really what I'm doing is I'm photographing contrasting light. This is the other side of the street when the sun has moved to the right, behind this tree on the upper right. And it's casting light on that wall with the shutters and the flag, and a boy walking down the street with his red pants and his shadow right on the sidewalk. I mean, that's partly luck. I can't say I planned that, but I'm a big believer that the highest form of photographic achievement is capitalizing on luck. Okay, Sometimes you can anticipate luck before it happens. Often when it happens, you don't have your camera. That's me. That happens a lot to me, but it's just something to consider. Okay. So, and I'm a fan of cropping. Cropping, I know crop is a 4-letter word, but you know what? It's okay. I'm going to give you permission to crop. In the days of film, cropping was looked down on, like, oh, if you have to crop, you don't know what you're doing. Wow, that's no, it doesn't make any sense in digital photography for sure, with all the megapixels that we potentially can have in our cameras. So you can reframe. I call it reframing. It sounds better than cropping. You know, it sounds a little more elegant, but reframing is totally fine. I believe there are pictures within pictures. This is another public realm. This is in Chicago. This is a street. Now, rather than standing, well, first of all, it's not a good idea to stand in the street. Okay, I got to tell you that as a teacher. But I wanted to find something that I could use in the foreground to give me kind of foreground, middle ground, and background, if that makes sense. But the key here that I want to mention in talking about light is that I use an urban setting as I would a studio, where I'm controlling a single light source. So the single light source, which happens to be the sun, okay, is off to my right. All right, it's casting its light onto a glass building, a glazed modern building to my left, behind me. And that light is bouncing back to the building on the right. That's why you see that kind of mottled look with the light on the building face on the right. So it's just a point to consider when you're photographing. It's a single light source. And you can do some great things if you kind of plan ahead or take advantage of happenstance, which is also very much allowed. You don't need natural sunlight. One advantage of photographing at dusk with digital photography is that you can get a kind of a blue color in the sky.
I'm watching the IAC. My camera club's got a presentation on it.
So when
The boys are home just fine.
Jesus Christ.
Nope.
no, I think it's somebody else. So don't forget, guys, whoever is speaking, you can mute
Love
your
you too. Bye-bye.
sound. Uh-huh. Okay.
Sarah, you need to mute your microphone.
Okay. I don't, it's okay with me. I just didn't want people to get confused. However, the quality of the blue color in the sky remains in digital photography. It's amazing what you can do. It actually looks better than in reality, if I can put it that way. I think that's my thought. But this is a part of a resort I master planned, and there was nobody in the swimming pool, which was great because I love reflections in water. It's like you can't go wrong. I think it's hard to do something wrong with that. But that's an example of working without sunlight. Here's another example of reflected light. I was in Toronto and I was talking to people about saying that I look for contrasting light when I'm photographing. And I get a look like, what are you talking about? Well, I realize the light's bouncing off objects and I'm photographing the object, like this building. This happens to be the Hockey Hall of Fame. But look at the light. Look, the model light. The sun is off to the right. It's bouncing its light off a glazed building, all glass, a modern building, onto the Hockey Hall of Fame. Just happens to fit almost just exactly. So I was walking along and one click, and that's what I got. Now, here's the situation. I like photographing old buildings, if I can put it that way. Maybe it's in part because when I look in the mirror these days, that's what I'm looking at, old, all right? But having said that, modern buildings that are all glass, for a lot of people, they look very similar. It's like, these big skyscrapers that are all glass, they tend to look very similar for many people. But what you should think about is photographing the reflections off the glass. That's the magic. So in this case, this is actually in Vancouver. It's housing the first train that came to Vancouver. You can see in the lower part of the picture, in the lower right, you can see the cow catcher. You can see the wheels of the steam engine. It's complex. It is a complex picture. But I guess what I'm saying is, as complex as it is, it's photographing the scene. It's photographing the space, the street space, the public realm. So that's why I wanted to show you an example of that. So let's talk about how we see and why those first two challenges of photographing contrasting light and the edges of objects and elements make sense. So here's the deal. When I was in school, there were 5 senses. I had trouble remembering those 5 senses when I was in school, and now there are 21 senses, 21 separate senses. Even with 21 senses, 60 to 85% of all sensory information that come to us is visual. It's amazing. It's amazing. And so I can tell you, we know now the very first thing we see when we open our eyes, all right? And that's what scientists refer to as spots of light. I say spots and slivers of light. You can describe it any way you want. The fact is, we're actually seeing contrast between light and dark, okay? The second thing we see, right after we see, it happens fast, okay? The second thing we see are edges of objects and elements. Scientists refer to lines and corners. They're all edges, all right? So the third thing that happens is that after we see light and after we see edges of objects and elements, those edges are combined to yield what scientists call contours and figural primitives. They're recognizable objects. So I'll give you an example. Let's take a chair, a typical chair. It has a back, it has a seat. Those each have edges. And then there may be arms, there may be legs or a support structure, I can say it that way. But all those edges then combine. So when you see a chair, you know very quickly, oh, that's a chair. You see chairs all over the world, if you get what I'm saying. But the essence is, because it's sequential, even though it happens fast, it's sequential. Spots of light and then edges of objects and elements. This is a project I did at the University of British Columbia. It's a wood products research laboratory, but I'm going to take you inside to one of the spaces. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually composing based on light. I'm pretending I'm squinting, okay? Because the actual space, when I open up the shutter, all right, is this. So now you see not only the edges of light, but you see the edges of a column, stairs, a chair on the left, a doorway in the middle on the left there. You start to see everything. My point is that you can compose just based on light, and you can compose just based on edges. So let's see if I can clarify that a little bit here. I show you this image to talk about edges. This is actually in Denali National Park in Alaska. It's an ecological triad, all right? But the key here is that it has all the components of a cinematic experience: space, shape, line, tone, color, rhythm, emotion, and movement. And you may say, well, it's not all there. Some people say, well, what about texture? Well, texture combines shape, line, tone, color. You know what I'm saying? So pretty much this is out of a book on cinematography. My son is a cinematographer. And so I learned that by stealing one of his books, okay? But the point is, line work is a big deal in art. Whether the art is cinematic or whether it's a painting or a drawing, line work is a big deal. But a line is a mental construct. You know, you can't pick up a line. Well, in photography, we're generally photographing what we'll call for tonight the real world. Okay, so I prefer the word edges. And that's why I'm going to talk about edges, but you can relate it to lines as well if you want to. So here is an urban setting in Chicago. This is a plaza in the city of Chicago. In the center of the plaza is this piece of sculpture. The public calls it the Bean. The actual name of the sculpture is called the Cloud Gate. Why I'm going to show you this is to explain that objects and elements have edges. So let's start with some big objects, like the bean has a bean shape, right? It's got edges. The buildings, they're big objects. They have edges. They also have elements. See the doors and window openings in buildings? Those are called fenestrations. Big word if you want to impress people at a cocktail party. But they have edges. So there's a lot of edges in this picture. The benches in the foreground have edges. The light standards have edges. You get the idea, right? But also there's spaces in this picture. There's spaces between the buildings. You just look at those buildings, you can see there's a street space and so on. They have edges. The space that I'm standing in, this is a huge plaza. It's framed by buildings, and then behind me, it's framed by some vegetation. So it's still a volumetric space. It's a huge one. In fact, it's probably too big. It only worked once, was when the Cubs won the World Series. Then it was great. But when urban designers have a chance to design a plaza, often, especially in North America, they think bigger is better. Okay, be that as it may. One of the most important edges to consider in a photograph is the image edge. It's the edge of the overall image. And it should not be neglected. It's a big deal. Let me show you something now. What I teach is how to see edges, how to see edges. So I'm going to convert this picture to all of its edges. Now, I can't see all those edges all at once, but certainly the edges between the big buildings, or the edges of the big buildings, and where the buildings kind of meet the sky edge, those are important. The edge of the bean is a big deal, okay? So I use that to compose the picture, okay? And I consider everything, including the edge around the whole picture. Now, it happens fast. It's not like I'm taking a few hours to do this, but when you're aware of it, it's amazing how you can start to sense it. And I'm going to give you a demonstration of that in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you a little story, because I was here very early in the morning. And in the center of the bean is, you can see clouds, and you see the horizon right in the center of the bean. I can zoom in a little bit here, give you right in the center of this thing. The clouds were moving. So I was thinking in my mind, now the clouds are going to part, and just even for 2 seconds, I'm going to get light streaming in. I'm going to hear harps and French horns. It's going to be, oh my gosh, glorious. Okay. When that golden hour light lights up these buildings. Well, it didn't happen. So what I did was I created it myself. All right. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to give some golden hour light, and the sun is reflecting off the bean. And you could say, well, that's cheating. You know what? There's no crying in baseball, and I don't know that there's any cheating in photography, especially if you declare it. So I'm going to tell you everything I'm doing and if you have a question anytime or afterwards, you can ask me what I did and how I did it if you want, no problem. But look at the sky, for instance. This is just image editing. That is the actual sky. Here it is before. It's just the data was there because I photographed it. I made the photograph as bright as possible without blowing any highlights, without overexposing or clipping any highlights. So I could then, in software, in Lightroom Classic, I could give it this look. Okay. what's missing from this picture is people. I was happy there was nobody there because, you know, if it was crowded, if it was like literally a big, I don't know, political rally or a celebration, that maybe that could be kind of cool. But what I did was I came back later and I got a group of school children in front of the bean with the school teacher explaining, you know, the field trip that they're on. And I got the city of Chicago reflected in the bean. So it's a whole different kind of mood, a whole different character. And yes, there's a pigeon, I think, on the top of the bean there, on the top of the picture. And people say, well, why don't you remove that? Yeah, I could remove it, but I'm not into like removing stuff. For me, the challenge is to find themes within urbanized areas that I feel are compellingly pleasant to my sensibilities, right? And they're not perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect picture. Frankly, if I was going to put an animal up there, I'd like to put a giraffe up on top, and that's my mindset. Okay. Okay, how about two more perceptual challenges? And these are photographing volumetric space. Whoa. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, how do you photograph empty space? Well, you're really photographing the edges of the space, okay? But photographing space and controlling the degree of depth, controlling the sense of depth in your picture. Because think about it, most of what we're photographing, not always, but most of what we're photographing are three-dimensional spaces, you know, if we're outdoors or indoors. And we can control that. So I'm going to give examples of how to do that as well. So let's talk about space. This is taken in Antarctica, but that's another talk. Okay, I mentioned that spaces can be called rooms. They can be called behavioral settings. This is a small one. This is a space in a relatively new building in Cambridge, England. I got to teach in Cambridge. Oh, it was awesome, guys. I love college towns. And especially with one like the history of Cambridge, England, it's centuries. It's incredible. In any event, this was the bathroom in my hotel room. And so I'm just showing you. So what am I doing? I'm getting in the corner. I'm in the corner of the space, because if I'm in the corner, the space will look a little bigger because I'm looking at the diagonal. That makes sense of the volume. Keeping the camera level, because I don't want the space to look like it's falling over. I want it, the only way to not have vertical edges kind of look like they're falling over is to keep your camera level. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But that's an example of a small space. Okay. This is an example of a larger space. This is in Toronto. This is the Central Library, the main library in the city of Toronto. And it's a multi-story space. And here, what I'm doing is very similar to what I did in the last picture. I'm halfway up in the volume. I'm keeping my camera level because I want to see a bit of the ceiling, and I want to see a bit of the floor, and I'm against a sense of the volume. So I'm looking at the diagonal. You don't have to do this. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. Because for architectural photography, I mean, I know we're talking about urban photography, but this is part of urban life. That's why it's so fascinating. It's kind of a neat thing to do. There's a lot of ways to photograph spaces, but I'm showing you this one for an example. This is a huge space. This is the new transit terminal in New York following 9/11. And this is just an unbelievable space. It's very modern, very contemporary. And I'm going to show you, this is a close-up of part of the space. I'm going to zoom back and you'll see the size of the thing. And here there's people. So here the idea was to not have any feet cut off, try not to, I should say, or heads cut off, you know, just trying to create a scene when people are all moving, although a lot of them in the foreground are sitting, but trying to just, I guess, portray a moment in time that kind of tells a story, if I can put it that way. So let's get away from these from the first three challenges I talked to you about. And let's talk about composition. All right. This is a big topic in itself, but I'm going to simplify it and give you some key things to consider. First of all, I'm choosing this picture, which is not really urban, is it? But it includes the horizon on the right and buildings and landscape on the left. It's a combination. The horizon only occurs where sky and water come together. So if you're not on a shore of a giant lake or an ocean, you rarely ever see the horizon. But we as humans are aware of something called the horizon line or the virtual horizon, which is what it's called when you can't see it, when there's something blocking it. And so the first rule of composition, these are going to be, I shouldn't even have said rule because there are no rules. Okay, let me back up. There are no rules in photography, which is fantastic. It's incredibly liberating. But can you imagine, it makes it challenging to teach. So what I'm going to do is to show you how you can compose to recall what your brain was telling you you saw when you were there. Hope that makes sense. Then if you choose to want to vary that and do something that is different than what you remember seeing, bless you, that's fine. But I want to at least show you how to achieve how to mimic human vision. So these are, I call them principles, my objective principles of architectural composition, okay? The first thing is to maintain a level horizon. So that's why I'm using this picture, because here's the horizon, that yellow line. Well, part of it on the right, I could see exactly where the horizon was. On the left is blocked, so it's a problem. Now, what I want to say is, what was I going to say? It's really good too. We want to keep it level. Oh, I know the Earth is round, right? I bet you guys know that too. But even physicists document the horizon as level. The Earth is so big relative to us that things look level, if that makes sense. So we want the horizon line to stay level. We also, the second thing we want to portray vertical edges as you see them, which means vertically, all right? So there's an example of a vertical edge on the left. That line on the left, we call that vertical because the top is directly above the bottom. That's the best definition I can give you for the term vertical. If you look it up, you're going to see there's some really amazingly complex definitions. But all those arches, the columns on there, those are all vertical. And that's how we see them. In fact, if you're in a room right now, you're probably in a room somewhere. Yeah, you guys are all in rooms, let's say. Wendy may be outside, I don't know, but everybody else, I'm just teasing, is in a room. If you look at the corner of the room, I bet it's vertical. If you look at a doorway, maybe in the room, the edge of the door, right and left, it's probably those are vertical. If there's windows in your room, I know some of you are in kind of it looks like a spaceship room. It's like a rounded room, but you get the idea. They're vertical edges. Look at them and they're going to look vertical to you. Now take your head and tilt it a little bit. They still look vertical. You can't do that with a camera. If you tilt a camera, everything goes wonky. So the key here is leveling your camera. It sounds easy. It's not easy. I will tell you that I have more bubble levels than you'll ever find. A bubble level on my tripod head, on my camera, bubble levels everywhere, okay? I still have to tweak in software ever so little bit, but I have to tweak to get it perfect, get the verticals perfectly vertical. Why am I harping about this? Why is this a big deal? Well, let's look at, first of all, gravity. Gravity, I'm going to consider it a force tonight, but if you consider it a wave or energy, it's fine. But if you document it as a force, I'm not a physicist, but a physicist will draw it perpendicular to the ground, okay? To level, perpendicular. It's we sense gravity. It's part of our being, all right? Physiologically speaking, in the upper left there, we have in our inner ears, in each inner ear, we have something called semicircular canals. It's like a three-way bubble level. Not exactly, because that would be a little painful, but you know, the idea, they're little kind of gushy, mushy things. That makes sense, but they keep us level. If you're, it's part of your vestibular system, okay? And don't worry about remembering all these words, but if it's not working, if they're not working, you actually can't even stand up. Like, that is how powerful that is. So the notion of horizontality, verticality is a big deal in how we see. And therefore it's a big deal in photography. So okay. Here's a part of one of my projects, and it's an urban project with a park. They're towers. Well, if I'm on the ground and I want to take a picture of the tower, I probably got to tilt the camera, which I could do, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. But there's a bridge here, right? So I got on the bridge and I can keep my camera level and I can take the picture. And it looks like it really does if you're on this bridge. And I look on the left-hand side, I decided to leave that sign that says Seymour Street. I could have cropped through it, but you'll see in a moment, I don't want to touch the edge of the sign. I don't want it to be confusing. Same on top. I let the wire at the top left of the screen, I left that. I cropped there, I cropped down to the right, I cropped at the bottom. I left in the lower right-hand corner, there's like a slip, a boat slip, that's called something. I can't think of the name of it, I'm sorry. But then there are boats, I got to cut through stuff. I can't leave everything in the picture. But anyway, it's thoughtful. The point is, it's photography with intent. That's a big deal. Purposeful. I'm thinking about the edge of the picture. So here I am on the ground. Now I'm going to photograph these towers, and I don't want to cut their heads off. So look what happens. Can you tell that the buildings look like they're falling over? This is one problem with a lot of photographs. And if it's purposeful, then really make them falling over. But this is not enough purposeful. This looks weird. And what I want to do is not have the buildings look like they're falling over. I want to have them look like they're standing there, like what I remember seeing. Can you tell? These buildings are straight up and down. That's how they were built. Okay. So how did I do this? Well, there's different ways. I could have gone and gotten a what's called a tilt shift lens. Very cool, but very expensive. So I don't want to teach you that. I mean, I can show you that, but I don't want you to think you have to go out and buy anything, right? I could have backed up further, right? But there's water behind me. And as good as I am, I haven't been able to walk on the water yet. And I like using tripods. So I want to have the tripod, and I want to have the camera on a tripod. I want it to be still. Okay. So what I did was I decided I would turn my camera in portrait, right? 90 degrees. So horizontal, we call that landscape, and then vertical, we call it portrait. It's not a person, but that's okay. It's vertical. Then what I did, that's the picture. That's the picture. But I cropped off the bottom, and then I don't tell anybody. See, I'm telling you guys because we're bonding tonight. Okay? But that's the picture. You don't have to tell people everything you did. Make a picture. So I dropped it, but it's okay. Yeah. How about people? You know, I was telling Clayton that I have a separate presentation just on photographing people in the urban setting. And if after I'm finished tonight, you want me to come back one day in the future, that could be a second urban presentation that really focuses more on people. But in this case, I'm trying to be part of the scene. So I'm standing by the waterfront walkway, which is designed for people who run, who walk, who ride on bicycles, all kinds of stuff. And I just was patient, all right? And I got this photograph. In the upper left, you know, it says why and why not people. Well, why people is because cities are designed for people. So it kind of like makes sense to have people, okay? You don't have to though, because why not would be because when you see a person in a photograph, your eyes go to that person initially. It's very interesting. So in magazine ads, depending on what they're selling, they might want to have a person, or they might purposely not want to have a person. I mentioned to you, I design hotels, or I used to design hotels. And sometimes they want me to photograph it. And I'm trying to photograph it, showing activity and people having a good time. And they're saying, oh, no, 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 no. See that person over there? He's too fat. And then he's too tall. He's too short. He's too dark. He's too light. You get the idea. It's like he's too young. He's too old. You can't win. So a lot of times when you see a hotel ad, they might actually, they're either going to have perfect people who are models, hourglass shape, or they're going to have no people. Anyway, just comment. So, you can only get so close to a building like the one on the left before you have to tilt the camera. All right. So I'm going to tell you how to tilt the camera in a way that works. Okay. And here's the secret. If the horizon line, remember that horizon line is not in the field of view. If you tilt the camera far enough up, which doesn't have to be that far, like the picture on the right, then have a good time, because your brain doesn't say to you, oh, it looks weird. It looks like it's falling over. You may disagree with me on this, but this is science. I'm just quoting what I'm learning from actually not photography books. Okay. I'm learning more from science books and looking at the history of painting and drawing. Here's the Royal Bank Plaza in Toronto. Well, I'm close enough here. That's all I can do is tilt it. And I'm happy with it. Yeah. Some buildings today are more and more buildings are designed where they don't have a lot of vertical edges. This is a combination of clients wanting something unusual and architects being bored, and they just want to do wild and crazy stuff and not worry about how they're going to clean the windows and a lot of other practical stuff. In any event, this is not my photo, but it's a good example to show you that this is what the building really looks like. How do I know that? Well, you see the light standards on the left and right of the picture. On the street level, there's those lights. They're vertical, and they are vertical. And that means the horizon line will automatically be horizontal. That's another secret. If you have a vertical edge or a line on the right side of your picture and a vertical edge more to the left side of your picture, doesn't have to be all the way, but not in the center. That's very tough to do. The horizon line will automatically be level. So now all I got to do is worry about the right side and the left side, and you can put like a grid on your screen in your camera, and before you know it, it's not that difficult to hold your camera level. Science fiction will actually purposely tilt the camera. If you want to pretend you're on another planet, the one on the upper left is perfect. If you want to pretend you're in outer space, then the one on the right is perfect. And I can guarantee you they're not going to have level horizons or vertical verticals, because that looks too earthly, if that makes sense. This is the photograph I used to use to talk about composition, because there's so many edges in this picture in Puerto Rico. Every arch has edges, right? It's just, oh my gosh, it's like a plethora of edges, a riot of edges. I don't know what to say. I'm not going to go through that. I'm not going to bore you with showing you what I did here. But what I'm going to do is to talk about some things that are important. And one in particular, I call it edges that breathe. Okay, edges that breathe. What is edges that breathe? I'm going to explain it. I'm going to explain it this way. Okay, I'm going to use a painting, one of the world's most famous paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, 1495 to 1498. And it is painting. Some people think it was long exposure. No, it's not long exposure. 4 years, 3 years, you don't need that. The thing is, I want to zoom in. First of all, I want to show you the picture. Notice the arches on the left and right, and in the center behind Jesus Christ on the walls. They're vertical. Those vertical edges are vertical. Leonardo could have done anything. okay? He didn't have a camera, but those are vertical. The horizon in the distance is level, all right? Now I'm going to zoom in because this is a very complex picture. These are the apostles. Notice how there's heads and fingers, like body parts galore, right? There's on the table, there's bread and potatoes, and I'm not sure, but there's a lot of stuff in this picture. No two edges of any two objects or elements in this picture are touching. They either overlap one another or they're separate from another. If they're separate from one another, they're breathing. Okay, that's the best way I can describe it. It's interesting how the front edge of the table is clean. There is nothing touching it except the hand of the apostle on the left. His hand is overlapping. His fingers are overlapping. So edges can overlap each other. Edges can be separate from each other, but it's confusing if they're touching. And you'll find in art, very rarely do artists ever take two elements in a photo and share the exact same edge when they're drawing it. So I'm going to show it to you this way. Edges of objects and elements can freely exist. So what did I do? I have here two spheres and two cubes, and they're floating in space, and they can freely exist. They're not even touching or overlapping the edges of the image itself. Remember, that's the most important edge. So also they can overlap each other. So now the cube on the upper part is overlapping another sphere and another cube and so forth. Things are overlapping each other. In fact, they're overlapping the edges of the whole picture. One advantage of overlapping, by the way, is you kind of start to get more of a sense of depth, which is one little depth cue we'll talk about in a bit, but just saying. But here's the deal, guys. Edges of objects and elements are uncomfortable when they directly align, when they're touching. So now we've got two spheres touching each other. We've got a cube touching the left-hand side of the picture, touching the sphere in the center. This is just not compositionally successful, okay? And there's a scientific rationale for this. And the reason I talk about science is that most people that are members of camera clubs come from very logical, thoughtful, rational backgrounds. They don't have to be scientists. That's not my point. But they feel that photography is a way to exercise their artistic side. It's fantastic. Photography is fantastic for that. So I want to talk to you in a rational, logical way. Because if I just said to you, you have to feel it. Ooh, you have to feel it. Some of you might say, well, that's nice. So what do you mean? Like, what do you mean feel it? So I'm trying to give you justifiable, scientifically proven, rational reasons. So because they depict a frozen viewpoint, pictures are particularly vulnerable to ambiguity. So the suggestion is avoid following or prolonging the line of the edge of one object directly onto the edge of another object. That's where like two edges look like they're touching, okay? The result, called false attachment, there's actually a name for this, okay? Can be an unwanted perceptual joining of two objects that are actually separated from one another. So this is, I'm not making this up, this is a professor of psychology in the University of Pittsburgh. Okay. So here's an example. This is a photo in Boston. It's complex. There's a lot going on here. What's interesting is on the left, we have a building that's composed of both a vertical piece, the bricks, a vertical piece, and on the left, that glazed area, that's actually on an angle. It's an unusual shape. And to portray it like it looks like in real life, I kept the camera level, so it's angled okay. And then there was this tall ship. That's not the ship I came in on, but that was there. And I thought, well, look at that. That's leaning to the right. And the glass wall on the left is leaning to the left, so it kind of balances. Yeah, look how the edge of the tower behind the tall ship mast, the upper part of the mast, the edge of the tower. Look how it's over, the mast is overlapping it. It's not lining up exactly with the edge. It's interesting. It's interesting. Here's more of the same picture. Remember, I like to zoom around, okay? So now we see different picture. Look at the buildings. Buildings are either separated by space or they're overlapping one another. Not only that, if you kind of scan the image a little bit, you'll see that where it's overlapping a window, it's either cutting through glass. One building is overlapping a window in the distance, it's cutting through glass. Or concrete or some metal element. It's not lined up with another edge. I hope this makes sense. I'll show you the whole picture here. I'm going to pan back. We'll see the original one and we'll see what I just showed you and we'll see the whole scene. I'm just taking it apart little by little just to kind of show you how to create a composition that maybe some people would say, well, if you don't like it, it's okay. Please don't. Oh, how do I say this? First of all, I love my pictures, which is incredibly arrogant, except that my mission as a teacher is to get the people that take my workshops or you guys who are listening to understand how you could love your pictures as much as I love mine. That would be like awesome, okay? Because remember, in the end, there's no rules, but I can't teach that way. So I'm trying to give you the notion of how I would do it if it was a painting. I've converted it to a photo. I mean, it's a photo. So look at a horror picture. Well, first of all, in a horror movie, they're going to tilt it, the camera. They're going to have the top of his head touching the top of the picture. Uncomfortable, awkward. His right shoulder is lined up with the edge of the door. These things are all purposeful, guys. You may think, oh, no, I'm making this up. No. You go start taking a look. Go to a museum and look at paintings. Look at books that on architecture. Look at I don't know, whatever. Look at movie trailers. Okay, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. I am going to highlight one particular photographer who I got to work with briefly. Because when I was practicing architecture at a young age, we worked on a project in Palm Springs. Julia Schulman, who is considered one of the top photographic architectural photographers in history, which is only like 150 years. But the point is, this is really a big shot. Okay. This is one of his masterpieces. Why is this a masterpiece? Well, there's a few things. First of all, the shape of the mountains in the distance and the shape of the chairs, the lounges in the foreground, the idea is that they're balancing each other. You can take that or not, but I'm telling you, okay? He photographed it at dusk. So what you're looking at, you think you're looking at the inside of the house through a glass wall, but because of the light at dusk, it just blends right in, right? Now, he did a couple things that are really very, very good, fantastic. The chimney, you can see the top of the chimney there. That is actually, the fireplace there is only on the second floor. It doesn't go to the ground. So what he did was he opened the door to the den that's just to the right of center. You can see that dark rectangle underneath the chimney. He opened that up so it lined up exactly with the chimney, because he wanted to make it look like there was this exclamation point or this vertical element tying the building to the ground. Now that's esoteric, that's art, but I'm telling you why it's considered like an incredible picture. The final thing I'm going to tell you is that if you look at it closely, you can see there are 4 roofs. There's the roof of the second floor that's behind the chimney. See that in the top? Then there's the roof of the living room that's closest to us. Then there's the roof over the deck just to the left of center. And then there's the garage roof in the distance on the left. Notice how each of those roofs slide past each other. They're each independent of each other. If they were overlapping, it would probably be okay. But if they were touching, think about that. If they were just touching visually, it would be awkward. It'd be more difficult to understand. It wouldn't be as elegant, wouldn't be as good a picture. So all these things matter, is my point. Let's talk about depth, okay? Let's talk about depth. One way to show depth. Why did I show this picture? Because I'm using a wide aperture, all right? So I got a very shallow depth of field that conveys depth. And I'm using, obviously, birds as my intro for these challenges. However, edge positioning conveys depth. I mentioned that. I showed you that with those two spheres and the two cubes, right? This is a lobby of a building in Vancouver. It's called the WASC Center for Dialogue. It's a very highfalutin name for meetings facility. Okay, that's what it is. So when people photograph this space, they go to the other end. They go to the far end. And why? Well, because the stairs is in the way. Well, I wanted the stairs in the way because occlusion or something blocking something else conveys a sense of depth. So our brain goes, oh, depth. So I'm purposely enhancing the depth of this picture. There's other depth cues that I'm going to tell you. Okay, the stair, each of those stair steps are exactly the same shape. But because it's slightly curved, they change shape in the picture as they go up. They're getting smaller as they go up. Your brain goes, oh, depth. The carpet on those steps, the carpet is exactly the same on every step. I know, I got on my hands and knees while people are looking at me like, are you crazy? That's exactly the same carpet. You have to believe me on that. But look at the carpet is changing. It's changing its tone as it goes up. It's getting darker. The texture is changing. It's getting more diffuse. This is called textural diffusion. The actual names for this stuff, okay? Often, not always, often warm colors come forward, like the doorway on the lower left, that wooden door, it's a warm color, and cool colors like the sky in the upper part of the picture through the skylight, cool colors recede, generally, not always, but that's another sense of depth. There's one big sense of depth in this picture, and that is all the horizontal edges in this building are going to a vanishing point. I think maybe I don't have it here. I don't have, the vanishing point is just, it's oh boy, it's in the distance. Let me just do something here. I got to turn on my, see if I can turn on my cursor. Let me just try this. Sorry, guys. Just trying to make this look a little better. Gotta get rid of the floating media controls. So now I have this yellow circle as my cursor. There is a vanishing point right in here, okay? All of the horizontal edges on both sides, everything's going to a vanishing point, right about there. Okay, so those are some of the depth cues. Maybe I got more for you. Oh no, that's it. Okay, those are the main kinds of depth cues. Point is, you can control that. So believe it or not, there are 4 types of space, 4 types of depth. There's flat space. I'm looking at basically a flat wall. Yes, there's a little gouge in here, a little gouge. It's flat space. All right, that's one type of space. Actually, not easy to find unless you're photographing a blank wall, or in this case, it's got different color in it, but still, you got the idea. The second type of space is called limited space. So in this case, there's stuff blocking the wall. So occlusion, fancy way to describe it. There's a lady, she's sitting in front of the wall, and there's a pole in front of the wall. That's called limited space. My favorite kind of space is called deep space. It's not Buck Rogers. I don't know if any of you saw the kind of the semi space flight this morning. It was really interesting to watch. Anyway, I digress. This is called deep space because there's vanishing points, right? There's vanishing points here. This is called ambiguous space. Now, this is interesting. This is the fourth type. Ambiguous space is where you kind of don't know where the camera is. You kind of don't even know what you're looking at. Like, what is this? Hopefully it's something that's reasonably pleasant, but this is part of another picture. And what I'm doing is I'm inside that building that I showed you, okay? The one I just showed you. And what we're going to do is we're going to pan back and I'm going to show you again another example of deep space, which is my favorite kind of space. That doesn't mean it has to be yours, but it's my show. So I'm going to tell you what I love. This is an incredible space. It's multi-level space. So I can get up halfway, right? Halfway between the ceiling and the floor. And if the picture is actually this vertical thing here, I fill it with other stuff because I like images to fill the whole screen. That's just me. But you see, those are the horizontal edges and they're going to a vanishing point. Now that vanishing point, which is that plus sign, that yellow plus sign, that's way in the distance. It's not up close to us, it's way in the distance, but that's the vanishing point. I also like photographing ceilings. Whoa. So if I'm on the ground and I'm looking straight up, the vanishing point is going to be, in this case, right there in the center. All the vertical edges now are going to a single point, a vanishing point. Now, if you're aware of vanishing points, it'll make a difference in your photography. If you're not aware, don't worry about it. The point is, I'm trying to show you why people feel that some photos are compelling, okay, and why others don't get the same comments or accolades or appreciation or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to spend a little time in this building because it's an awesome space, and I promised you also that I would show you some examples of reimagining reality. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'll show you. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could do it, but I'll show you what I do. This is this central lobby. It's huge. It's incredible. It's got one glass wall, partial glass ceiling, and then it's got on the right, it's got all these classrooms and work areas and kind of a grand staircase. And in the center is it's a meeting room, and on top of it is like a lounge. Okay, interesting stuff. So here's a photograph where I'm showing half of I'm peering into the lobby on the right, and I'm walking along one of the galleries on the left, solid wall. Not that exciting. Well, wouldn't it be great if I could reproduce what's on the right on the left? Okay, so I'm going to reimagine reality through the power of symmetry. All right, I'm going to reimagine reality. So that's my space. That's cool for me. I mean, you don't have to get into it. I'm saying I'm experimenting. I'm exploring. You guys have to do the same. You should consider doing the same. You can play. That's what creativity is all about, is just play. All right. Here's my ceiling shot. I used the fisheye lens because I want to get the whole thing in, right? So I love the best part about this building, best part of this image for me is the glass wall at the bottom and part of the glass ceiling on the top. So the rest is okay, but it's not as exciting. So I'm going to reimagine it and just show a heck of a lot of glass. And two of these are called nests. That's the name they gave these things. And yes, it's distorted. It is distorted. I don't care anymore right now. I'm just trying to do a cool looking image. Another one. This one, look at glass roof, glass wall on the left. You know what I'm going to do, I think. I think you know what I'm going to do. I want to make this like an awesome glass box with this unbelievable kind of floating lecture hall in the center. So symmetry, I have a whole talk just on symmetry. It's very powerful because it's automatically, things are automatically balanced. Okay. Yes, I know there's a person here, the same person's over here. You're right, all that stuff. That's okay, you know. That's it's imagery. It's just having a good time. This is how I teach creativity, and I'm going to give you the formula for creativity, which is akin to the exposure triangle, except this is the creativity triangle that I invented. All right, starts with curiosity, goes to play, and then you exercise your imagination, and it fuels your curiosity again. So it's like a circular experience. But this is the fun part of photography. Okay, I've given you 4 perceptual challenges, and now what I'm going to do is kind of start to wind down. I think I still have some time. By the way, Judy, if you're listening, give me at least 10 minutes warning before you cut me off, if that's okay. So what we want to do in photography is take on these challenges all together, all at once. Now, when you're learning, then the challenge would be just worry about one at a time. But eventually, I'm going to do all at the same time. Okay. This is a synagogue in Prague, the Czech Republic. The reason I'm in these different locations is because I give workshops in Europe and North America. Well, I was giving workshops. Now they're all on Zoom, but hopefully, I don't know, by the end of next year, maybe, I don't know, when people feel comfortable to travel and they're allowed to travel and they feel safe, I'm giving Zoom talks. Anyway, point is this. So why was I telling you that? Because I always arrive like a few days early so I can check out the locations and I can find good places to take people to photograph. Okay, so this is a synagogue that's described as as an Art Nouveau stylization of Moorish architecture. Talk about a mix of styles. It's the color thing. It's the colorful thing. It's not a very narrow street. So I'm using a super wide angle lens here. Super wide angle lens, like a 10 millimeter wide angle lens on a full frame sensor to get back. So I try to keep the camera, I took the camera level, I did it vertically, and I cut off the bottom because it was just asphalt, right? Here's the interior. This is using a tilt shift lens. This is actually a panorama. So I could get the ceiling and the floor and the whole thing. I'm standing on the floor. Obviously, I'm standing on the floor. And it's an incredible space. Look at the color. Oh my goodness. Glass ceilings as well as stained glass windows. That's another view. So again, I'm pretending here, I don't know, I'm getting married, I'm going to walk down the aisle. I don't know. The point is, I do like symmetry. This is natural symmetry. Ceiling, ooh, holy cow. Quite amazing. I wanted to give it a sense of depth. Wide angle lenses also enhance a sense of depth. If this was a house that I was selling, I would not use super wide angle lenses because when people come to the house, they're going to say, oh my God, it's not as big as it looked like in the picture. This is different. I'm purposely trying to make spaces feel wow. So I embrace wide angle lenses. I love wide angle. You don't have to. I'm just saying that's what I'm doing. Then I have a fisheye lens. This is a rectangular fisheye. So it's distorted, but it's distorted in a way where I'm not offended. This is what happens if I turn it into a circular fisheye. Now I'm looking 180 degrees in every direction. And you know what? Fisheye lenses can be very gimmicky, but I have had them for like over a decade, 15 years. Only in the last year or 2 or 3 have I started thinking, you know what? I love photographing ceilings. And I love photographing spaces that are round or have round elements because in the fisheye kind of makes sense. Any event, This is a more modern building. This is in Berlin. This is the central train station in Berlin. And I'm going to take you inside. You can't, a lot of places now you can't photograph. So what you got to do, what I do, I should say, is, I know this is on tape, I have to be careful. But what I did was I kind of scoped out the place and I decided, okay, let's say I'm going to get one picture before I'm stopped by a guard. Because if I ask permission, they're going to say no. Okay. So I sat down on a bench. I knew where I wanted to photograph. Sat down on the bench and I put my camera on a tripod and I got it ready so I could open the legs quickly. Okay. And I went to the edge of a balcony. I opened the tripod and by the time I took the one picture, which was bracketed, I bracketed the scene, one stop apart, bunch of brackets. Two guards came up and said, "Can I help you?" What, that's a nice way to say you can't do this. All right. So I said I was from Canada. Sometimes that works. Did not work. It did not work in that case. This is a 4-level train station. So this is part of the picture. It's very contemporary. It's really cool space. So here's the overall space that I got. I was overlooking a balcony. This is very cool. I'm having fun. This is the National Theater in Prague. Same thing. What now? I'm going to tell you what I did here. I enhanced this reflection. All right. I use a program called Reflect Studio, and it gives me ability to create reflections in water and do it with varying levels of movement in the water. It's very cool, very easy. Photoshop can do everything. And I use Photoshop, but not if there's a program that can do it like really fast. Because I'd rather be out photographing. I'd rather be teaching, but then secondly, I'd rather be out photographing. Behind the computer is okay, but it's not like my favorite thing. This is a different kind of view of a space that's trying to take advantage of this notion. This is a horseshoe-shaped theater. This is like an old-fashioned opera house. It is opera house. It's awesome. Look at all that gilded coverings. There's another one. Oh, I have to do a ceiling, but a fisheye works with because it's a horseshoe shape. So like it made sense. Okay, a couple more things. I want you to consider this is the Texas State Capitol building. It won't surprise you to tell you that it's the largest state capitol in the United States. It's Texas. Okay, fine. I want you to consider something. The subject of a photograph is the entire field of view, edge to edge. It's not just an object floating in an otherwise leftover space. That's the best way I can put it. The subject of a photo is the entire field of view, edge to edge. Very important. The dome of this Capitol is 200 feet high from the ground, the inside of the dome. And I tilted the camera. You see, I tilted the camera and left the horizon line in view. So I call it a principle. It's not a rule. I decided in this particular situation to violate one of my principles. I'm trying to show you how with intent, with purposefulness, you can do anything you want. In this case, I tilted the camera up and I want to see the dome and I want to see the rotunda or the floor of this awesome round space. Then I went up mid-level. Remember I said you go mid-level, you can try to get the ceiling and the floor at the same time. Well, I tried and I didn't make it. Like I got a piece of the floor, I could not get the dome. So you know what I'm going to do now? You get to know me. I got this fisheye lens, right? And when it's a round space, it is distorted, but it's very cool. I mean, the top part of the picture actually doesn't look distorted because it is round, and so is the bottom part. It's kind of stretchy, but I don't care. I love it. these are all the former governors of Texas that are on the walls here. Then I thought, okay, wouldn't it have been better? I'm so lucky, but I didn't get lucky enough to get it when light was coming through the dome. See these little slits in the top of the dome at the top? Those are openings. I wish I was there when light was coming through the dome. So I'm going to reimagine reality. And here it comes. Whoa. That's cool. So I got light coming into the space. I know, I'm crazy. That's fine. That's me. You know, one thing, as you mature in life, meaning as you get older, you lose your filters. You just say anything you want. And that's what I'm doing. But I'm serious about what I'm saying. I'm just being very open with you, explaining what I was trying to do. So we're going to end with we're going to go back to some cityscapes. This is Toronto, and it's a long exposure. This has to do with having patience, okay? Because I was there in Toronto for a week. I went every day. I went out here. I got one day that was awesome, okay? But at the same time, I also got evening shots, and I made sure that I would take pictures from the exact same location. I put a little marker where my tripod was on the ground, and I remember the height of the tripod exactly, and the lens that I used, the focal length, yada, yada, all that stuff. So I could come back in the future and show the same scene. So now what I can do is I can imagine a sunrise. Watch here. This is my very quick sunrise. See, that's cool. That's fun. So I'm playing with digital imaging. I'm trying to find ways to do things that were tough to do in film. So my final thing I'm going to show you has to do with patience. Okay. I have been trying for the last, I think, 7 years to get a good summer solstice sunrise. All right. Now, the summer solstice, as you probably know, is the longest day of the year. That's how they describe it, because the sun is far it rises as far in the north as it's ever going to rise. Okay. This is the north face of Vancouver. It's actually northeast, and it doesn't get sunlight directly on it. So I wanted to see if I could, do it. So for 3 of the years, it looked like this. I get up at 3 in the morning to get ready for the 4:30 sunrise or whatever, 5 o'clock sunrise, and it was cloudy. This is Vancouver. Yes, patience. What happened the next 3 years? Well, the next 3 years, but not in a row, but three of the years, there's like a lot of traffic in the water. Now, individually, each of these ships could be interesting to photograph. I know that, but they're blocking my view. I want to get the cityscape because it's so cool. I put together a whole presentation just on cityscapes because they're incredible. For me, they're like the world's largest kinetic sculptures. They change over time. In any event, that was normal. Then this year, first year, I got it. This was in June 20th, 2021, a few months ago. This is the sunrise. Now, why does it look like this? Well, first of all, the sun's behind the mountain. Like I'm on the North Shore, there's mountains behind me. The North Shore Mountains, very cleverly named. And the sun is risen, but behind the mountain. So I see the sky, I see the sexy sky, but not on the buildings. However, I got it. So this is first light at the foot of what's called Burrard Street. I'm looking right down the throat of Burrard. In fact, that building in the distance on the left where my cursor is, that's my building, not mine literally. When an architect designs a building, we call it our building. It's not my building. They won't let me in there anymore. In any event, I'll pan back here and tell you what I decided to do. This is one of the images I got. Now, this actually is a 10 image panorama shot with a 500 millimeter lens on a Sony, not on a Sony, on a Nikon D850. There are the images. Those are the 10 images, and then I combined them in Lightroom, and it's actually called a 16-bit floating point TIFF. I don't want to confuse you with this, but it has the properties of a raw file. Okay, that's great. I'll come back to that in a moment, because I then went home. I was going to pretend to tell you that I stood there all day waiting for sunset. I know I went home and I came back to try to get Last Light. Last Light wasn't very good, not picture worthy. I mean, I took the picture, but it's not too neat. So I waited a little longer and I got dusk. Very nice. So now what I can do is I can create a sunrise from this picture, which is a single photo with a 120 millimeter lens, with the 500 millimeter, panorama, and give you my final image here. I think it's the final one with this, like a sunrise. The sun's coming up over the mountain. Ooh-ah. That's my picture. I'm happy. So I'm going to conclude with this. Before we ask questions, I got to give you a little pitch, okay? So I love doing this, and it's a good way for me to meet people, and I meet so many wonderful people. I give, over the last, since COVID started, Zoom became very popular. I mean, like, if you're zoomed out, it wouldn't surprise me. But I've spoken over the last year and a half to 48 clubs across North America. So I have a bunch of topics, right? This is just part of them. I've got like 15 topics, but the one that follows from the urban one is kind of photographing a slice of life. That's photographing people in an urban setting. Benefits of creating an artistic image series. I have one on black and white and color. I think I gave this already to the club. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I can't remember the name of your club, guys. Sorry, you'll tell me that after. Sorry, in Edmonton. Waterfront cityscape photography, I alluded to that. Joy of symmetry and composition, I kind of started that one a tiny bit. And then travel photography, Antarctica, Portugal, Czech Republic. Okay. So right now I'm giving virtual workshops. Instead of 4 days, they're 4 weeks long. They're sold out for this year. I'm going to start again next year, but virtual urban photography, virtual fine art photography. I have a 2-week one that I could give anytime, which is designed for camera clubs. Like if 10 or 12 people will want to sign up for a workshop over a 2-week period that includes Zooms, hands-on photography of your choice, and then image editing or creating an image series that deals with enhancing creativity. Then when times get good again, meaning are good, when times get normalish again, fine art printing, urban heritage photography, advanced architectural photography, travel photography to Tuscany, and travel photography to the Czech Republic. Those are things I have lined up. I had to cancel them all when COVID happened, which is understandable. That's it. Thank you so much for being so patient. I'm hoping some of you are still there because, when you're giving a presentation, you don't see anybody else. So I'm now going to get out of this. And I'll just tell you one more thing. I have a newsletter that comes out like 8 times a year, maximum 8 times a year, not 8 times a week, okay? Because I get those from other places. But it announces when I announce workshops. I give once in a while tips and so forth. Consider signing up for that. It's on my website. My website is rick@rickhulbertphotography.com. And either Clayton or Judy would know how to get in touch with me if you guys were interested in any of the things I talk about. So thank you so much. I am now going to figure out how I can stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions. And if you want to, you can put your you can put your video on so I can see you guys, but that's optional.
I have a question for you, Rick.
Sure.
What is your angle of your fisheye lens?
It's a zoom fisheye. It's a Canon lens on a Sony camera, and it's 8.5 to 15.
8.5 to 15.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. It's a
That gives you a full circular image?
yeah, it does. The 8.5 is the circular.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sure, no problem. Anybody else? I look scary, but I'm actually very cuddly, and I will answer any question. Ideally photography related, but you can ask me anything.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
How do you post edit your photos? Because the architecture, they're so clear.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, I enjoy wide angle lenses, and wide angle lenses have a huge depth of field. It's almost like the trouble with a wide angle lens is you can't isolate something, because the depth of field is like enormous. So that's the first thing. I'm using a tripod. People ask me what's more important, the lens or the camera. I know you asked about editing, but this is part of editing. Image editing starts in your camera. All right. So they asked me, is the lens more important or is the camera more important? Like the sensor or the lens? The most important thing is a sturdy tripod. I kid you not. A sturdy tripod. Digital imaging is so precise that it almost works against you because it's less forgiving than film. Film is much more forgiving.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. Then I use Lightroom Classic. I actually, for the club in Edmonton, what I actually did was I gave a presentation on my workflow, and then I actually came back and I used attendee images to edit, because it's more effective when I show you how I edit your images, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see what I do. But basically, I look at tone, I look at color, and and contrast. Contrast is a big deal. Half the sliders in Lightroom are contrast, but if they call them all contrast, it's already confusing enough. So, texture, clarity, dehaze, they're all contrasts. And then there's this thing called contrast, which I hardly ever use because it's global. So I'm trying to be a little more selective, if that makes sense, Tara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I hope that started to answer the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Rick, for everything. That was a fantastic presentation. And I know here in the spaceship, as you called it, we really enjoyed it. It's informative and entertaining. We did have one question from the spaceship, and that was, do you ever do anything handheld, or is it all strictly tripod?
Okay, when I'm photographing what I call a slice of life, which is photographing people, or let's say anything like moving objects, like people for the most part, or animals, I would handhold. Okay. Otherwise, flat tripod. It's getting harder to take tripods into churches. So I've been experimenting with higher ISOs, hand holding, and some of the new software is really fantastic for removing noise from high ISO. You guys know what I mean when I say ISO? So kind of it's how the sensor interprets light. But in any event, for architectural stuff or for like the plazas and the buildings, most of it is on a tripod, which is a pain in the butt to carry, but it makes a big difference. Oh, one more thing. On the tripod, I do not use a center column because the center column is like having a monopod on top of a tripod. It's that sensitive. Sensors are scarily sensitive. Air movement can shake them. And you might think, "Oh, how's that possible?" But I'm trying to honestly tell you how the pictures are as clear as I can try to make them. I'm not saying they're perfect, but I'm trying to do that. Okay.
Hi, Rick. It's Clayton here. Really enjoyed the workshop tonight, and I really look forward to another one with some urban photography with a slice of life added to it. So
Okay.
as a encore to this, we hopefully can get something like that lined up in the near future with our club, and probably CAPS would be very interested too. I imagine maybe we could do it together again. That would be great.
Well, I enjoy doing this, and one day when times are better, I would love to come out to Alberta and offer a couple of face-to-face workshops. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I attended one a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. So it'd be great if you can come back and do it again. That'd be great.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I really enjoyed myself. And thank you all for listening. And I'd love to one day be able to see you in person. It would be awesome.
Your room's available, Rick.
Awesome. Okay, the Royers are so nice. Last time I was there, I got to stay with them. They're actually really nice people. That might surprise some of you, but they're really nice people. Okay.
Hi, I'm Scotty here. I got a suggestion for you in regards to your tripods. I've been going around when I was back able to go into Scotland, was to use gorilla tripods. The beauty of it is that you got all these little pitons where you've got the lines going to that keep you from going into the areas that they don't want you to go into. And you can just take the gorilla and put it on top of that. You don't have to carry a big cumbersome tripod, and it's not offensive to the people that are allowing you to come and photograph.
Good idea. Good idea. Okay, then I'll tell you what, I'm going to sign off. So you guys can, if you have more business to conduct or whatever, but I have to also stay married. So I'm going to go see if my wife recognizes me, you know. So, but thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah. Good night, Rick.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, we'll conclude the Zoom presentation as well from here. Thanks again.
All right, everybody.